Now, businesses affected by the oil spill could be granted rental deferrals on a case-by-case basis to help with their cash flow. It's part of measures announced in Parliament to support those facing economic losses. Transport Minister Chee Hong Tat, Sustainability and the Environment Minister Grace Fu and National Development Minister Desmond also delivered ministerial statements. They were responding to 40 questions filed on the oil spill incident. Ms. Fu, who's also Minister in charge of Trade Relations, says Sentosa Development Corporation will use social media to promote a return of footfall. She adds that support for firms is differentiated as each business is affected differently. For instance, those operating sea-based activities would have incurred greater losses compared to those that are more inland. One MP also asked if there were more plans to help affected firms.
Apart from rental costs, businesses face other costs as well. For example, wages for their employees. So is the government looking into possibly helping the small businesses further and, for example, seeking compensation and providing some financial schemes like perhaps bridging loans on preferential terms to tide them over until they receive their compensation?
Government agencies will be very prepared to listen to the plight of the businesses and see how we can best help them. There's always an option of making a claim, and we'll see how we can help the businesses to bridge that cash flow problem in the interim process. I would encourage businesses that have been affected, first of all, to start compiling your numbers so that you can form a basis of claim.
Singapore will gradually scale back some of the measures adopted in the early days of the oil spill cleanup that are no longer as pressing. Sustainability and the Environment Minister Grace Fu says this would allow more focus on current demands.
Authorities say air quality monitoring stations have detected no anomalies since the 14th June oil spill, and there's been no impact on water supply either. So the coast might be clear for Singapore to dial back some of the earlier steps taken to protect public health and safety.
As we're now in the second phase of the cleanup operations, some of the precautionary measures adopted in the first phase, such as daily air monitoring at affected beaches and water quality monitoring for our fish farms, have become less pressing. Given that the conditions have stabilized, we will gradually step back measures that are no longer required so that agencies can focus on the current demands.
Cleanup efforts now focus on oil stuck in hard-to-reach places such as rock buns and breakwaters. As of 30th June, 1,200 tons of oil-soaked sand and debris have been collected, the bulk sent for treatment and disposal. The minister says much of the oil slicks on beachfronts have also been removed, but concerns lingered in Parliament about the longer-term impact, including on development plans and the cost of habitat and environmental surveys of affected areas.
I have a couple of clarifications from the Minister for National Development. First, I do not think I heard the answer to part of my question about whether the oil spill has affected plans for a second marine park in the Southern Islands. And secondly, how much are the various studies and research projects to study the impact on the biodiversity implications on our various natural ecosystems?
At this point in time, we continue to assess the impact of the oil spill. There is no impact on our plans for a second marine park in Southern Lazarus and Eastern Kusu. And secondly, in terms of the total cost of monitoring and research, we are still working out the research questions and methodology, processes and locations of these works, and the exact figure will be worked out in due course.
The Sustainability and the Environment Minister says that if and when volunteers are mobilized in the final phase of cleanup, the Public Hygiene Council will help train, equip and coordinate the effort, so Singaporeans can contribute to the reopening of the beaches safely.
The Transport Minister Chee Hong Tat says Singapore's reputation as an international hub port has not been damaged by last month's oil spill. He says industry experts around the world have called Singapore's response, quote, extremely fast. Mr. Chee adds that actions taken were in line with global practices. Charlotte Lim with more.
The response to the 14 June oil spill was the topic MPs most wanted to ask about during this Parliament sitting, with over 20 questions filed, and several rose to further ask how Singapore can respond faster and better in future.
Would MPA consider reviewing the storage, loading and mobilization processes of all equipment, including required containment booms, to ensure that mobilization time can be reduced?
I'd like to ask the Minister if our contingency plans are sized for a much larger oil spill that is a lot closer to our shoreline, making a full frontal impact on our shoreline. And do we have the assets and the methods that are needed to deal with an oil spill of such a scale?
Transport Minister Chee Hong Tat says contractors already responded as best as they could, given the bad weather conditions and nightfall.
Knowing that boom deployment requires time, even if you are able to do it very quickly because the weather was good, it was daytime, it is still going to have a time lag, and during this time the oil would have floated away. So that is why the international industry practice is not to try and fence in the oil, because it's not practical. The oil would have floated away, and it's to deal with what is remaining in the vessel to prevent further spillage in case it comes out.
Mr. Chee adds Singapore has all the resources it needs, even if bigger spills were to take place in future. It also has strong partnerships with industry players and conducts regular exercises on oil and chemical spills.
Are these NGOs invited to participate in the exercises, and including the volunteer groups? And if no, would they be invited to do so?
Do we want to involve the volunteers who would not likely go out to sea, but more likely will be helping on land? I think that's something which we'll be happy to take a look together with MND and MSC colleagues.
Mr. Chee adds that greener maritime fuels like ammonia and methanol will present different risks from conventional oil spills. With Singapore committed to decarbonisation, it is performing tests on such fuels to develop safety protocols.